Welcome to the Cables to Clouds podcast, your one-stop shop for all things hybrid and multi-cloud networking. Now, here are your hosts, Tim, Chris, and Alex.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Cables to Clouds podcast, Fortnightly News. I'm your host this week, Tim, and of course, with me always, I've got my hetero life mate, Chris Miles, at BGP Main on Blue Sky, or no. Yeah, you changed it. BGP Main.
Yeah, I changed it.
Yeah,
I changed
that's
it.
right. And then, of course, myself at Carpe-DMVPN on Blue Sky as well. So this being a news episode, we're just going to launch right into the interesting news that we rounded up from the last couple weeks. And our first story actually comes to us from CIO Dive, and it's an article from, or about, should I say, Akamai Technologies. And specifically, it has to do with Akamai realizing their cloud spend was crazy out of control and how they kind of regained control of their runaway spending. So the article specifically points out that their acquisition of Linode last year was a big trigger for them to kind of realize that they'd let their cloud spending just get completely out of control. So, I mean, we see this a lot where a lot of organizations go all in on cloud. They start developing for it. They just put pretty much everything. They throw the kitchen sink at the cloud, and then eventually the cost of running that comes back to haunt them. So, we've talked about this on the podcast many times about cloud spend and how, where are the cloud savings. So this is an interesting look at just a major vendor who kind of bought into the cloud thing and is finding that, after they acquired Linode, that they just spent a ton of money in the cloud. It kind of triggered them to go back and look at the books. And in the article, they're talking about repatriating some of those workloads essentially to their private cloud workload that they bought, right? Linode basically is a private cloud provider, for those that don't know. And it's pretty interesting. Of course, not everybody has their own private cloud provider, but there's not much more to say about this one. It was just kind of interesting. So you took a look at this one too, Chris. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, not much. I mean, yeah, it's like obviously funny to see that someone was trying to control their cloud spend, and repatriation was a part of the piece of it. So we've obviously had many talks on this podcast about repatriation and whether or not it's. But yeah, people always talk about repatriation. They're like, oh, that means they're moving everything. And it's like, no, they're moving certain things that are, a crucial piece of the business that may not need to run in the cloud, right? So that's it's good to see that coming to fruition. But obviously, it's Akamai, right? They pretty much have. They do CDN type stuff as well, right? Like there's a lot of So it's like obviously they need to cast such a wide net across the globe to do stuff like that. They need the cloud in order to do that. So it's just good to, I guess, kind of get proven right in some aspects on this one. So that's good to see.
I forgot to mention it, but there's a gold, just a huge nugget of gold there in the article. It's near the bottom, and it's a quote basically from the person at Akamai. Forgot the name, but I wanted to bring it up because this is such a true statement. Specifically, it says, "We were over-provisioned because we were leveraging cloud to compensate for deficiencies in the way our workloads were developed and engineered." Right. Yep. And if that isn't a true statement, then, any networking person is well aware of the over-provisioning and gold plating of networks to kind of compensate for poor application design. And it's right. Good to see somebody come out and just say like that. And so, we've said that also many times on the podcast, that like, hey, if you take these workloads, these unoptimized workloads, right, that have no tolerance and that are chewing up processes, and just put a middleman in there by throwing it in the cloud, like, of course you're not going to save money. It's gonna ruin you.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out, right? All right. Next up, we have this one, I think, just squeezed into our news cycle, right? I think we actually debated on covering this on the last episode, but with the way it fell, we pushed it to this one. So there's been an announcement from OpenAI that they're basically doing another restructure to the organization, and they're going to turn the public arm of the company. So if you recall, they kind of split these things across, where it started holistically as a nonprofit, and then there was a for-profit arm, and now they're kind of operating as two entities. And we've obviously been a bit cynical about how we think those things operate on this podcast before, but now they're changing the profit arm to be what is called a PBC, or a public benefit corporation, and basically I'll be honest with you, I had not heard of what a PBC was before I saw this article, so I did a little bit of research into it, and basically it just sounds like this differentiates from a typical public company or a C corporation, kind of like just in terms of where the orientation of the mission for that company is. Like it's like legally obligated to follow kind of whatever their mission statement is, and balance their financial profitability with that specific purpose. Don't know how that's governed, but that's kind of what I've taken from it. And there's obviously greater accountability and flexibility in decision making. It sounds like they will be able to prioritize like kind of societal or environmental goals over direct profits for shareholders and things like that. I'll be honest with you, man. When I saw this, I was naturally cynical about it again, because we've seen what's happening with OpenAI, and there's been a lot of kerfuffles. Obviously, Sam Altman's also in hot water right now for some potential non-technical related aspects of his life. But I'll be honest with you, man. I'm actually struggling to see what is bad about this. This actually seems like it could be a good thing. Assuming, like I said before, though, with the PBCs and things like that, I don't know how that's governed. I don't know how that's enforced. So I'm sure there's loopholes and things like that I may not be aware of. But overall, this does seem like a good thing. It seems like they're going to, the way they're framing it is that this aligns to their mission to reach the AGI, right? The artificial general intelligence for the public, which is seen as their societal good contribution to the world, right? But yeah, I don't know. How do you feel, Tim? I'm sure you've got some hopefully a hot take where I don't.
No, so this is interesting. So the Public Benefits Corporation, we talked about this a little bit last year when we had Joe Onasik on, if you remember. We were talking about the
right.
tech layoffs and like what people can do and like what the answer is. And he had been talking about the Public Benefits Corporations. I forget it's B. I forget what the specific 802.1c or 802.1b or something like that. Mm-hmm. Now I'm thinking of like wireless, but but whatever you call it, there's a corporation, a filing that is Benefits Corp, and I have the same question, which is who determines whether it's like what is the public good and all of that in there, and maybe it's the board. But what's interesting about what I found interesting back then and what I still find interesting here is that we have this legal vehicle by which the corporation can essentially become unsuable by investors. Because like part of the reason why capitalism is just, in my opinion, gone off the driven straight off of the cliff is this thing where corporations can be sued if they don't do everything possible to maximize their shareholder value. They can be sued by shareholders for not doing everything possible, whether that could be good, bad, or ugly, or whatever that looks like. Anything possible to maximize share value becomes suable. Like the shareholder can sue them and get money, basically. So I think that the bit with the Benefits Corporation is essentially structured legal protection for that. Essentially. Yeah. So, if you invest in our corporation, you understand that you can't sue us if we do something that's, for the public good. Which is, what kind of world do we live in where that's the thing we have to do, but whatever.
No, that's a good point, because like obviously money and shareholders, those are that's a tangible asset, right? You can immediately say if that was met or not met. Whereas I guess with a PBC, like I don't know how you I don't know how you measure
Who
that.
decides?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's probably going to be much easier or much harder, I should say, to build a case against like you saying like, oh, they did not fulfill their duty as a benefits corp towards goal A, B, or C, right? Yeah. See, that's why we have you here, man. You keep me in check.
I'm glad to help. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to the next one here. So our next article comes from. Hold on. I just gotta. So sorry. Our next article comes from CIO Dive actually, and this one is talking about Microsoft's plans this year to pour $80 billion into their cloud data centers. Holy crap! Yeah, to build basically to build out all the framework and stuff for AI workloads. So, I mean, it doesn't specifically say, hey, this is like we're going to build Azure, all the Azure regions. It doesn't go that far and explain exactly what these $80 billion is earmarked for. But I mean, if we're assuming that their plans to upgrade and increase the amount of AI workloads, that are available, part of that probably is just, I don't know if they're going to be handing over tech to OpenAI, like as part of this, or if they're just going to like build out more Azure infrastructure to make, AI services available for customers, or little column A, little column B. It's not clear from the article, but I mean, $80 billion is, well, it's just a shitload of money. I mean, it's an absolutely mind-boggling amount of money. So, this is interesting because up until now they've pretty much had, like you were saying before we record, Chris, that OpenAI has been like their poster child, like their baby. So I don't know if this indicates a doubling down on that, and I think we're gonna have to wait and see, or if it indicates that, hey, they're diversifying, or maybe just straight up that they're adding the ability for customers to consume. And hoping that that'll bring the customers, right? So
yeah, my initial thought about this is that it's probably the latter. It's because it specifically calls out them putting $80 billion into the purpose of training and developing AI within these data centers. And to me, that seems like, I mean, obviously you could say like, oh, we're just giving infrastructure to OpenAI to perform that. But if they're calling out specifically to do training and things like that, it sounds like they're trying to come up either with something on their own, or at least, kind of maybe taking a bit out of AWS's book and saying like, hey, we're just going to have a kind of a market for this kind of stuff. Or maybe the developer their own thing. I don't know. But I mean, like you said, they've always been obviously keeping OpenAI a little bit at arm's length. They haven't really completely embraced them. I think just because probably Nadella doesn't want to pull in Sam Altman just yet, just by way of there's always been controversy and things like that. So I don't know.
A little bit of a hot potato.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know. We'll see. But that's my prediction anyway.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I mean, truthfully, we're just gonna have to wait and see. But it does point out training. So is Microsoft going to create their own model? I mean, and if so, does it take $80 billion to create your own model these days? Like, who knows?
That's true. That's
right?
a good point. That's a good point. The person who puts the most money in wins, obviously.
Wins, yeah, absolutely.
All right, next up, we have an article here from Fierce Network. I feel like every time we have something on here from this publication, it's always like a drastically hot take.
Like a hot take?
Yeah. This one is of no exception, right? So they have an article here that in 2025, it looks like an analyst of some sort, I forget who exactly the name was, is predicting that Google Cloud may overtake Azure, Microsoft Azure, within 2025 in terms of the market cap for public cloud, which I think is... I would not have said that. We've been on here talking for a couple of years now how we Microsoft might take over as number one soon, let alone getting leapfrogged and put in a third spot. I mean, they specifically call out the fact that Google does very well in the SMB space, which is totally valid. I see that we just had Erica on here, and she was talking about working at a startup, and they went into Google because people like Google, and it was probably easy to get started, and they do a lot of credits and things like that. So it makes perfect sense. But like, I think they mentioned that the market saturation was like AWS was like 31%, Azure 20%, Google 13%, which I'll be honest, that sounds higher than I thought for Google, if I'm being completely transparent. But nonetheless, they call out specifically that Microsoft does very well with enterprises and is working in arenas with like things like IBM and SAP and things like that. But Google is, what we said last news episode, they're making this big push about, Gemini is the main focus for 2029 or 2025.
I mean, maybe it'll be 2029 as well.
But I cannot foresee that happening within a 12-month span for them.
That's a hell of a growth period. In 12 months. That's a very large month-over-month increase.
Azure tanks, bro. It's one's got to go up, and that one's got to go way down, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's not an infinite amount of market share. Like, I think they're definitely jockeying there. So, yeah, it's a radioactive take. I don't know what to say to it. I do. Having read the article gets into basically why we think this, and they actually have at least a thesis. It's not just let's get clicks by saying weird shit like thing.
It's not based on nothing.
Right. I don't know if I'm still like, I'm with you. Like, I don't know that I agree. But I mean, well, the truth is we don't ever know. One thing this thing is proven is that we truly don't know. Like you said, we thought Azure by this point might be like really, really dogging AWS's heels. And I think the AI thing has definitely really shaken the whole damn market up. And yeah, so that's a big one. But yeah, I didn't think Google's share was, I would have thought 13% either. And of course you do the math on this, right? So you have 31% for Google, 20%, for Azure, and what was it, 13%? Yeah, exactly. So we're saying, are we seeding? Basically, the other side is other. So how much does OCI have then? How much is all the other private and public cloud, startup or IBM or whatever we're calling public cloud now, Alibaba and all those, right? So that seems like a pretty anyway. Yeah, not much to say. I guess we will see if Google really does catch up. I will point out that, of course, we've struggled with this too. All the analysts do is decoupling Microsoft's cloud Azure offering from 365 and all of their other stuff that's hosted on Azure. That's always been an extremely hard thing to decouple. So I think they actually they point out in the article as one of the reasons why Microsoft has always seemed so far ahead, but might not really be. So yeah, we're gonna see.
Yeah, it's weird. It's funny how many customers I talk to on a daily basis, or I should say probably prospects, and I just kind of line of questioning, like, hey, what clouds are you in? What are you typically using? They're like, oh, well, a bit of Azure because we use a lot of O365, and I'm like, even the response to that question is like in that camp. I'm like, that's not. I mean, technically, I guess you're probably using Azure, but I wouldn't say that's just pure SaaS, right? Like that's
right. I'm consuming services that are hosted in Azure, but I'm not like an Azure customer.
Right. So it's like, but that could also speak to why Microsoft has such success, that there's cohesion between that. Right? Like even the mindset is that, like, if I'm using O365, I consider myself an Azure customer.
And therefore it's easier for me to get started in Azure because I'm quote unquote already there, even though you're not really, right? But I get that. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. And we'll close out this week with a kind of a funny one, honestly. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. So NVIDIA had a conference recently where Jensen Huang of NVIDIA basically said that he did a bunch of stuff that was hilarious. I don't know if you saw it. There's a video where he comes out with a giant NVIDIA GPU on like what looks like a shield, basically.
No, I did not see that.
Oh, you gotta find it, because I was joking with somebody. I was like, "It's way too flashy. You're not going to be able to deflect any, and it looks weak. You can't deflect any sword strikes or mace hits with that thing or anything. It looks like a buckler, like a big old shield." Anyway, so in this article from AOL.com of all places, so
Back from the dead, bro.
Right? I mean, just go get one of the CDs if you want to read this. Go get one of those free CDs, the 1,000 hours, so you can read the article. So anyway, Jensen Huang says basically that AI agents are becoming a thing, and in this new era of AI agents, that IT service organizations will become the quote-unquote HR of AI agents. So yeah, a lot of heavy lifting with a lot of words there. So the idea, of course, is that these agents are essentially not quite autonomous, but like purpose-built to perform whatever task the agent has been created for, and that therefore the IT would become the shepherd, I guess, of these agents. And I don't know if I feel like HR is a bit of a I don't know. I don't even want to say hot take. It's just a bit of a stretch or something, because, I mean, can I put the AI agent on a pip if it's not doing well? Can we let it go, or I don't know, give it a pay cut?
This just has me feeling sorry for all the people that are specifically individual contributors because they don't want to be a manager. It's like, well, according to Jensen, eventually you will be a fucking manager. Over something that won't talk back to you, I guess. So, maybe you get the that power complex that you've always wanted. You can you really push down hard on your workers.
We can build an AI agent whose job is to agree with everything that you say. Perhaps that's give it a prompt, load up the agent with a prompt that says it'll like, you're my manager and I love you and I'll do anything you say. Who knows? I don't know what to say to this. It's kind of a ridiculous article. I mean, I get the feeling like it was made for clicks, but not the article. Sorry, the wording or whatever, if you will, the quotation, that it was meant to turn heads and get headlines. But I mean, AI agents is a thing. It's the idea of we're kind of preloading prompts and then kind of packaging up almost like a Docker container, an AI agent that will follow the prompt and carry out the task for which it has been prepared. Right. But I still don't know if IT becomes the HR of AI agents, or just kind of like the lifecycle manager of an AI agent is probably more accurate.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, he can have the quote as ridiculous as he wants, but really what it means is just that you're changing how you interface with their technology, right? So it's like, sure, maybe. 2025, I have actually heard multiple times that 2025 will be the year of the AI agents from people. So that does sound like a thing. But, we potentially have some talks coming up with some guests, maybe about some of these agents, and we'll get into that. But yeah, I feel like the number one phrase we say on this Fortnightly news show is "we'll see," and this is no exception, right? We shall see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a new way to consume AI by kind of making it more autonomous, and I think that's the goal, and that's where it's getting to, is that we're going to allow AI to be more autonomous and do more work on its own, so it can secretly create Skynet under our notices. But 2025, you're the AI agent. You heard it here first. So
yeah.
All right, and with that, I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up. I hope everybody had a good time. We of course, we always have some stories that we don't necessarily cover on the news. They're in the Fortnightly news document that we put in the show notes of every episode. We encourage you to take a look at those stories. There's just stuff that we didn't have time or need to get into very, very deeply on the show. But we think are interesting and that our listeners, viewers, whatever, will want to take a look at. So take a look at that. And of course, always like, subscribe, buy the breakfast cereal, play the home game. And we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Hi everyone, it's Tim, and this has been the Cables to Clouds podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe to us in your favorite podcast catcher, as well as subscribe and turn on notifications for our YouTube channel to be notified of all our new episodes. Follow us on socials at Cables2Clouds. You can also visit our website for all the show notes at cables2clouds.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.